Out of the tunnel here on College Football Live. You think Clemson and Florida State struggling is the ACC's biggest problem right now? We unveil a scenario in which they might be left out of the playoff altogether. We all know who's number one. Ohio State's earned it. But how close is it between Indiana and Texas A&M for 2 and 3 hours before the committee weighs in? Our experts do. And he went from quarterback to linebacker to Heisman contender in 3 years. How Jacob Rodriguez did it. He joins College Football Live. And in 5 hours from now, it's reveal number 2 from the College Football Playoff Committee, where all these slots will be filled out, at least the first couple of rows. The only thing we know for sure, it's going to look a lot different than last week. You know, the playoff criteria has been tweaked a little bit, but for the purposes of today's edition of College Football Live, I want you to focus on the top 2 lines. A dozen teams, as you know, are including the 5 highest ranked conference champions. Keep that in your mind as we discuss here over the next half hour. Another discussion point, how bad of a weekend it was for the ACC. Virginia's magic just ran out. They had won 7 in a row. They hadn't lost a fumble all season, and then they coughed up 3 in that loss to Wake, and we'll wait to see what that means for their ACC chances. Louisville lost to Cal in OT. Cal feels like they could lose or beat anybody on any given Saturday, and on this particular one, in extra session, Justin Wilcox and company got it done. Duke lost to UConn. Now, this is not going to affect them in the ACC race because, of course, it is a non-conference game, but it certainly doesn't help the image of the league to be losing to the Huskies, which they did. So after all the carnage, who's got the best opportunities to make the ACC title game at this very moment? Right now, by a hair, it's Georgia Tech at 52%. Duke, despite their up and down season and bad loss over the weekend, are just behind them at 50%. And with that, we welcome you inside College Football Live. Tom, Sam, Zubin, and the playoff insider, Heather Dinich, who's going to really help us dig into this scenario we're about to talk to. Very interesting. A lot of people are talking about it. So let's dig in with regards to the ACC and the CFP. We are calling this, yes, the ACC doomsday scenario. Very apocalyptic, Heather, all right? So let's just run through this and we'll get everybody's thoughts, right? So we know Big Ten's getting their auto bid, SEC, of course, and the Big 12, of course. We said 5, right? So 2 auto bids are left. Let's run through it. JMU, Signetti's old team. Let's say they run the table, win the Sun Belt, win the title game. They would be 12-1. Now, USF, who has been the darling of the G5 and the committee this year, let's say they run the table, they win the American, they would finish at 11-2. And let's say, for the purposes of this hypothetical exercise, that Duke ends up winning the ACC. If Duke were to run the table and win out, you can see Heather's reaction right there, they could only finish at best 9-4. Simple math. 2 spots left in the auto. Seems like to me, at least on the surface, this would be deserving, this would be deserving, and this one could be on the outside looking in. So you take us inside. What is the possibility that something like this could occur and the ACC could be left out of the playoff entirely?
It's definitely possible, but here's where I would pump the brakes on this.
Okay.
Tonight, when the ranking comes out, are both of these teams ranked?
Unlikely.
Aha, right.
Unlikely.
So I would expect South Florida right now to be the number 12 seed. South Florida has a much better resume than James Madison, which has a strength of schedule of about 111th in the country. Their loss is to Louisville.
Yeah.
Here's why I wouldn't rule out Duke entirely in this scenario. Duke, in this scenario, would have a win against the CFP top 25 team in Georgia Tech in the ACC championship game. So the selection committee would have to weigh that win and the ACC title against JMU's best win, which is against no one, maybe one team with a winning record.
Old Dominion right now, it kind of looks like. That's not Georgia Tech.
It's not, right? So you could have a 4-loss ACC champion. You had a 3-loss ACC champion in last year in Clemson. How much different is that? The UConn loss is glaring.
Okay, so it's a possibility. Sam, I want to go to you because you actually called JMU last week. From what you've seen and what Heather has laid out, is this a deserving squad if it comes down to something like this?
Well, it comes down to where they're going to be ranked in that first college football ranking, and also where Louisville is going to be ranked. Why do I say that? Because JMU has one loss. Their one loss is to a Louisville team that was a top 15 or so team. That loss really was tied going into the fourth quarter. So if Louisville continues to win as the season goes on, that loss will look better for JMU. And so JMU has an opportunity to get a quote-unquote good-looking loss on their schedule. And the way they're playing with Alonzo Barnett at quarterback and their defense, one of the best defenses in the nation, they have a pathway.
Yeah, it's interesting because now you start getting into schedules, strength of conference, who are you playing week in and week out, regardless of that Louisville loss that was early in the season for JMU. But if you look over to South Florida, I think, is a different animal. And I've had the opportunity to broadcast 2 of their games. And I can tell you right now, their quarterback, Byron Brown, could play for any Power 4 school in America. He is an absolute nightmare to deal with. And Alex Golish and that staff completely remodeled this football team up front in the trenches on both sides of the ball to put together a team that is awfully difficult to handle. They've got great team speed. They, on average, get the playoff within 13 seconds on offense, so they're going at a rapid pace. And Byron Brown is so difficult to handle. They're going to have the win on the road versus Florida. Obviously, they have the loss. It was a big loss on the road at Miami. They dismantled Boise in the opener, and they just dismantled a team in UTSA that went out and beat Memphis a week ago on Friday night. And I think the team you've got to be worried about in all of this is South Florida, and I don't even think it's close.
Well, let's say, Luke, to your point, South Florida does end up making the college football playoff. They have Navy this weekend. If they win that game, it's pretty much looks like it's smooth sailing. That's not my concern for the ACC. My concern is not necessarily James Madison, but it's actually Duke. And why do I say that? Heather made a great point that Duke may have a game versus Georgia Tech in the conference championship. But it also may not be Georgia Tech. It could be a team like SMU, which has multiple losses, that could make that conference championship game. There are 5 one-loss teams in the ACC, and many of those teams play each other, but SMU is not one of those teams that has to play some of those teams ahead of them. And then Duke has a chance to try to knock off this weekend, knock off Virginia, who is ahead of them. And so it might not be Georgia Tech that Duke plays if Duke ends up making it. It might be SMU, which may not be as big of a case for a team like Duke.
Sam, that's a fantastic point that you bring up, but I also want to add on that it is not about the most deserving team. This is specifically in the selection committee's protocol. Their jobs are to select the best team. So at 11-1 with a conference champion in the Sun Belt, JMU might look deserving, but the committee will also look at that game film to determine who is the best team, because at the end of the day, that's what their job is.
James Madison or Duke? How do you size it up? Tom kind of gave us his spiel here on USF, but 12